how to turn my camera on. It was that physical shield on over the camera.
Yeah. That'll happen. I had that happen yesterday where it was like, dude, your camera's broken. I'm like, is it broken? I don't know about that. And then I looked and I was like, no, I just had the shield on. You got to do that sometimes, you know? I mean, we know with you, with the whole like always shirtless type vibe, you might be a little more used to it. Me, with my room being kind of where my stream setup is, gets a little squirrely, you know? Gotta kind of keep the privacy right. Just to give a little background, what other sports outside of the UFC you were professional in?
So I was a professional football player. I played in the NFL for the Houston Texans and 1 week on the Arizona Cardinals, but the NFL. And then I played professional rugby in the States. And then I also represented the United States national team.
Awesome. And what would be the thing that like drove you most to become a football player to kind of like start your professional career in sports?
It was just the sport young boys played in the 90s. That's what you weren't cool if you didn't play football growing up. That's the like generation that I came up in.
Yeah, and as well as kind of like just the place that we grew up as well. Football was a pretty big and prominent thing in our community, I would say, in the town in Green Mountain where we're all from.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if people know, like your dad was my Pee Wee coach. Like that's how we eventually became to know each other. But yeah, football was, like I said, in the 90s. If you didn't play football, you weren't cool.
It's basically like football and Halo, I feel, was like the things that made you cool back then, right? I was
That's the title of my autobiography, pretty much.
Football and Halo, huh? That's just where it all began. Yeah, it's crazy for me because I was thinking back, like one of the things that I really like couldn't like kind of get off my mind was how big of an impact your brother and you played in my whole role of getting into competitive gaming, because you guys were just always so into being good at Halo or the best like shooter that was out on the market at the time, or even fighting games. Like your competitive nature between the two of you and me being around that so much with my brothers too constantly pushed me to just want to be the best because of the age difference that I had with you guys. That was like the only way I felt I could get respect.
Yeah, that's just like, it's this competitive bug is just a thing that I can't shake in everything that I do. So yeah, when it's playing video games, playing sports, playing Magic, like I'm always trying to be the best and find out different ways to get the edge.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Couldn't agree with that more. And one thing that I also wanted to touch base on was what made you transition from like playing Yu-Gi-Oh and games like that to finding Magic the Gathering?
So it was really two things. So obviously, we were big into Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day. That was like our game
Yeah.
that we played all the time. I went through a little phase where I just wanted a game with a tighter rule set. Like I love TCGs. I wanted a game that just had legit tight rules and it wasn't crazy. Like you got to read new interactions and how stuff works every single week. And that was Magic. Magic has a super tight rule set. You know how cards are supposed to work. You don't have to look up different translations. So I played standard for a little bit when getting into it, and then kind of stopped playing. And the rise of Commander with I mean, James and Chris, like we just have a group of dudes, James, Chris, me, my brother, four guys, a pod, that they were like, hey, you can all four play at the same time with all the cards that you already have. And it was just too easy.
Yeah, I think that Commander brought a lot of the like more casual side of card games and players in general to Magic the Gathering, especially during the COVID era when it really got kind of pushed out there. Like, yo, this is the format you can play at home, and it still kind of can be competitive if you want, or it can just be for the fun, just absolutely crazy things happening every single turn. There's not like a meta per se as there is in standard or modern or even limited. Like for me, my background in Magic, right? I play competitively, so I have a weird relationship with Commander for that reason. I like it for what it's done for the game, but I hate it for what it's done for the game, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. That's how all, constructed players feel. But for our group, right? For our group, it was literally one dude came over and said, listen, just grab 100 of the cards that are in the basement right now, pick your favorite creature, and we can all play. And that got us into the game. That got us all back in immediately.
It's kind of funny too, because when I think about like how we played Yu-Gi-Oh with James and me and you, like growing up, we kind of created like almost like a commander-esque role there, where like you could have this blue eyes white dragon was going to get summoned no matter what, screw tributes, whatever. Like you're going to have a turn where you can just put this giant monster into play, and that's what your deck has to be structured around.
So that's what got us. It was literally like, hey, we can play this game that was exactly like we used to play when we were kids. Like you're gonna get to play your favorite creature no matter what. You're gonna have 100 cards, 100 cards, not 60, 100 cards that are all built around your one favorite creature.
Yeah. That's what makes Magic, I think, so good too, is that they found like a good place where the game, obviously like Commander's expensive now, but when you were first probably getting into it, it wasn't as bad as where it's at, because there just wasn't as many people trying to get after those cards and things, I feel. And more importantly, they found a way to make it to where like you don't need to have four of everything. You don't need to have, all of the copies to make multiple decks across the format and things like that. And that singleton really did make Commander like explode.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's what I say, that because there's a CDH, right? Competitive EDH. And I always say CDH players are just legacy players that don't want to buy four Force of Wills.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great way to look at that. I haven't thought about it like that, but honestly, that might be my new catchphrase for it, is that you just don't want to spend the money for the legacy cards. And legacy is a pretty fun format. One of our first second Grand Prix in Colorado was a legacy format, and that was actually my first time ever playing it. And some of these cards were as old as I am, and I'm like, damn, I didn't even know these things existed until someone played it against me. And I'm like sitting there reading cards for the first time that don't look like they're a Magic card, with like the weathering and stuff, the different borders back then. Really, really interesting to see where the game has kind of developed and gone to from there. So one thing that, if like we're still on the gaming topic, one thing that people really, really are interested in, what made you pick your walkout song, or how did you even like determine that that was what you wanted to walk out to?
So I went through a few, right? And we've already talked about that Halo was a huge part of my upbringing. And I wanted something that wasn't too like in your face and overt, but let those who know that I'm a gamer. Like that's what I just wanted to just put it out there. I don't like, if you follow my social media and stuff, I don't post too much about gaming. I'll share things now and then, but it just doesn't come up on my from me very often. So I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to let people know, like the people who know the Halo song, they know it. You hear the first 2 seconds of it, and you know the Halo intro. And it's just a shout out to my background, my hobby as a gamer, and the people that don't. It's still a cool song for the people that don't know, but the people in the crowd that know what they're hearing, they go wild every single time.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it has that like WWE pull almost, from like when the Undertaker's chime pops off, and like everybody goes quiet. And you were actually a pretty big wrestling fan before you even got into combat sports, correct?
Absolutely, I was. WWE was huge when I was younger. That was what we were all into. Yeah, I was huge in it, and then so yeah, I've been thinking about like walkout songs, post fight interviews, cutting promos on the mic. I've been thinking about this stuff for years, like 20 years.
Yeah, it's interesting because I obviously know so much about you, so I'm still trying to like structure all my questions. I'm like, man, I could just sit here and have a conversation with Zach, and it would be like we were catching up. But at the same time, all of my viewers are pretty new to you as well. I'm like, I probably still slay your last name on how I pronounce it to this day, because I just call you Zac Pauga, obviously, because that's just like how I heard it over the announcements, like my entire life, things like that. I mean, even like school teachers that I had that like knew that you and I knew each other, like, oh, how's Zac Pauga? I'm like, yeah, that's how it is. So now my chat just calls you Pougers the whole time whenever we're talking about you, because like there's a pretty well-known emote on Twitch called Poggers, and it's actually a tattoo that I have to get for my most recent subathon. But that's enough about me. Do you want to help us say your last name better?
So yeah, I recognize that it is difficult. I don't hold it against anybody, but it's the correct way is Paunga.
Paunga.
Yeah.
And I feel like you always try to like correct me, when I was younger and stuff, but
So I've gone through phases in life. I've gone through phases where it was like, no, I will never let anyone say my name wrong, and I will never say my own name incorrectly. But then, like at one point, I just sat back and thought, like, how much of my life have I spent correcting people that I'll never see again. Correcting strangers. Hey, no, that's not how you say it. So it's just whatever, but Paunga is the correct way to say
Well,
it.
I'll be sure to try to always say it the right way moving forward, so I don't actually make your dad hate me at all. You know, that's my goal. Just trying to keep in his good graces, because that's his name, and he's always been a very proud name about how he presents your family, himself, and just everybody. I mean, even when I was a kid, your dad would take me out there for speed training with you guys and put the parachute on me or the speed shoes and be like, "Hey, we're going to turn you into an athlete too, Tanner."
People don't believe me when I tell that. When I tell them, so like I was like 11 or 12 at the time, and after school, my dad would make us go to the park and run with wearing a parachute. Like people don't believe me about that.
It's because people don't actually watch anime. You know, they say they do, but then they like see the story about Rock Lee. You might be a true living version of what Rock Lee was. Like, at what point in your life do you feel like you took off the weights and really started excelling as an athlete?
So it's kind of weird, you know, like I had success in athletics my whole career. If we're gonna go with Naruto references, I was kind of a Neji growing up. I was like a prodigy a little bit, and I made it all the way to the NFL. But then afterwards, when I, just thought my sports career was over, kind of got fat, kind of got out of shape, and then started doing fighting for fun. And that's when like I started getting back in shape, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm actually really athletic. I had to like remind myself that I'm pretty naturally gifted, but I just needed the work ethic to go along with it.
Yeah, I actually remember your first fight and kind of just seeing that like twinkle in your eye when you got called the winner for the first time. And from that moment, I was like, yeah, this dude's hooked. Like, he's not going anywhere. This is his future. He's in it to win it. Like, even your mom, your wife, like everybody could tell, like, this is where your heart was, even from the exact first moment from seeing you into a ring. Can you highlight a little bit on what it was like for you stepping into the ring for the first time?
So it was scary, dude. I've ran down on kickoff in front of 100,000 people in the stands, a million people watching on television, but walking to get locked in a cage and fight a guy in a barn like that first fight was, we were in a literal barn. That was scary. It was nerve-wracking and terrifying, but I had put in so much work and so much effort, and I enjoy fighting so much that it was like coming home. It was like, I know this is what I'm going to do for as long as I can do it. And that specific fight, right? Like I said, that was my debut. I trained so hard for it. My week before, I was sparring. My last sparring rounds for that fight were Alistair Overeem and Curtis Blades. So the number 3 and the number 5 ranked heavyweight in the world, and they're taking turns. One's resting while the other one's beating me up, and then he takes a break and the other one comes in and beats me up. And then I went and fought some no-name dude and knocked him out in 7 seconds. And it was like, come on, man! I worked so hard. I need you to last a little bit longer than 7 seconds in here.
Yeah, that was basically the first thing you said as soon as you got out to the chairs and were like hanging out with us. Like, that's the difference between average, obviously, like the amateurs and the big leagues, is that your fight's over. You're just back to being like a spectator at that point. And that was the first thing you said. You're like, man, I trained so hard and it was over in the blink of an eye. And I was scared even watching you go into the ring. I'm like, dude, that guy's kind of big that Zac's going up against. Like, he might get like laid on or something. And then I saw your first strike and I'm like, nah, Zac's in control. This is what's about to go down. And yeah, like 7 seconds, it was done so fast. But at the same time, I don't think I breathed for like 30 minutes because I was just so worried. I mean, I see you as like an older brother. Obviously, with how life has like kind of gone, we're not as close as we were in our childhood, but that doesn't change like how big of an impact and like how big of a role model you've always been to me, and how just you're an amazing person, man. I mean, I can't stress that enough. I see you across your socials and stuff. Some people want to say like dumb stuff and like deal with the haters and stuff, but like you do it with a really good like trend, and you make jokes about it, calling yourself fat and stuff, even when you were a heavyweight. I mean, it really just doesn't get much better than I think how you handle yourself in and outside of the ring.
Yeah, man. I'm a little bit older than you, so I didn't grow up in this internet generation. And it doesn't hurt my feelings if people want to get, salty towards me or go come at me on the internet. I just need you talking about me. As long as people are talking about me, then it's all good. And you've got to be able to have fun with this. If you're going to do one of these professions, like being a streamer or being a fighter, where you're putting yourself in the public eye, you have to know 100% of the people aren't going to like you, and that's fine. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, I think like that was one of the things I struggled with is like me being such an extrovert and social butterfly. I always wanted everyone to be my friend, but that is just not how the real world works, right? Like when you're in the bubble of school and even like college, it kind of starts to get a little bit more like out of that bubble, but you still kind of have it. You have your groups, you have your cliques and things like that, and you get comfortable. And then the moment you put yourself out there into the public, they're like pitchforks left and right, like you were on cloud nine at the top of going into the finals of the Ultimate Fighter, obviously. Unfortunately, you did lose. And where did your mental go from that?
So so that was the first fight that I've ever lost, but I've had plenty of L's in my life. I've lost plenty of football games. I've lost plenty of rugby games. There's nothing quite like getting knocked out, but I knew the answer. And I'm committed to this sport, like I said, for the rest of my life, long term. There's only one thing to do, and that's get back to work. Like, just get back to work. And like I said, I don't care about the trolls. I don't care about the haters. I I actually went on to Tough, the Ultimate Fighter, wanting to be the bad guy. That's what I was trying to push. That's what I wanted. And then I came off, they show the show, and then everyone likes me. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess we got to roll with this instead. But so when all these burner accounts are trashing me after losing in the final, that doesn't bother me at all. Losing, not performing the way that I know I can, that upsets me. And so you just have to get better. And I had to go right back into the lab, get healthy, but improve, get myself better.
And with that loss, if you hadn't lost, would you have stayed a heavyweight moving forward? Or do you think you still would have found your way back to the light heavyweight where you began your career?
So that loss was a blessing, because if I was enjoying being a heavyweight so much that if I didn't get knocked out like that, even if I would have lost a tough scrap, I probably would have tried to convince myself to stay at heavyweight. But just that's heavyweight MMA. You blink, you close your eyes at the wrong time, and the fight's over. And so I got that taste. I tasted that, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, yeah. And recently we have a new heavyweight champion with John Jones. What did you think of that fight?
So it was very interesting to see that John is still on form. That 3 years went by, and he still kept up. But the story of that was how poorly Cyril did. Cyril Gahn we knew his grappling was bad with Francis, but he just had no answer. Like, if John had done some super slick moves to get him down, or some crazy submission, but it was just super simple. He slipped a punch and grabbed a body lock, and Cyril fell down, and then Cyril could not get back up, and then tapped to a guillotine. Like, didn't fight the hands, didn't go out, just tap. And so, yeah, it really showed the level that John Jones has been able to maintain, and the huge holes in Cyril Gahn's game.
Do you think that we'll ever see Ngannou make a comeback to the UFC, or do you think he's done?
I don't think he'll ever come back to the UFC. I just think the gap between him and Dana, him and UFC management, is too far now. If they will always do whatever makes money, but at this point, I think that both Francis has his honor that he walked away and that he wants to do things his own way, and the UFC is kind of upset that he turned down the biggest contract they've ever offered a heavyweight.
Yeah, that's fair. It was bigger than Brock's, which was probably pretty eye-opening for a lot of people to see someone walk away from that kind of money. But at the same time, I mean, as you know, as a fighter, you're going in there, you're risking your life every time you enter the ring. I mean, there's no promises that you walk out the same person that you walk in. And how do you kind of deal with that thought process?
So for me, I'm just an idiot, I guess. I'm not. I don't really care. I have kids and I love them and I want to be around for a long time to take care of them. But I love to fight. I love to get in there. I love to scrap, and I don't care. I don't care. I'm going to go in there and throw hands. And I believe in my skills and I believe in my preparation. I don't ever plan on losing. I've lost one time in 14 fights. Like, I've never gone into the cage and been like, man, I don't think I'm going to win this one. I believe in myself. I believe in my coaches. I believe in my preparation, and I like what I do. So, maybe that's a bad answer, but there's a lot of guys that if you're going into the cage going, man, I really hope I don't get hurt, or if you're worried about CTE, don't fight, man. There's other ways to make money. I was making good money before this. There's plenty of ways to make money other than fighting in a steel cage.
Yeah, no, I can completely agree with that. Obviously, as with my background, I do dumb stuff for money all the time, like locking myself in a room for 30 plus days or something and allowing people to make incentives that make me eat chili peppers with hot sauce inside of it. Not a good idea, but that's my stupidity. I do stupid things too, so I feel you on that. And that's a great answer, honestly. I think you got to be a little bit stupid, to want to kind of be a fighter or be a streamer or do anything that kind of puts you out there in the terms of not having like a guaranteed paycheck. There's always the safer route, right?
And listen, every day, every single day of my life, when I wake up, I only do what I want to do. And that's go train, and that's go fight people and get better and work on myself and spend time with my family. And that's the choice that I've made, and I risk my health for it. But it's I would make that trade every day of the week. I will never go trade my time for money again. I'll never go work for somebody else.
Yeah, I think once you get the taste of kind of the other side, right, the greener pastures, some people want to call it, you really do start to get that feeling of, man, what was I doing? Was my soul was being sucked? Like that's kind of how I feel when I've been like stuck in the 9 to 5 grind. Was, for me, what was my trigger that like pushed me towards my things was losing my dad. And seeing my dad, owned his own business my entire life. And when the recession kind of took that away, I'd never seen him lost before. That was my Superman. That was my leader. That was my provider at that time in my life. And the switch finally flipped where he was like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help out? And, kind of role reversed. I started helping with bills and things like that. And I was like, holy cow, I'm 17, 18 years old here. And I'm becoming the provider. I'm becoming this guy, Superman. But then we kind of pushed each other to new heights. And I found myself like in a career where I felt really successful. And I then had my dad get diagnosed with cancer. And at that point, I questioned everything I was doing and was my life fulfilling? That was the question I asked myself. And it seems that you've started to find something very similar in the fulfillment from fighting and just all around being able to pursue your dreams.
Yeah. And for me, it was the birth of my first kid. And like Moana was born, and I was just trying to think about how to be the best parent. And the only thing I could come up with was to be the best parent, you have to be the best example, right? And at the time I was a cop, right? And I just hated my job. I absolutely hated going in every single day and working for the government and taking people's freedom away, taking people's money away. And so I was like, all right, is this being the best example for my daughter, trading my time and money and life away for a steady paycheck? No, it's not. So it just became finding what that thing is, right? You got to, I'm not telling everybody, go quit your job and just do whatever. You got to know what your passion is. You can't just jump out there and think that you're going to, be an Uber driver and that's going to fulfill your soul. You got to find what you're truly passionate about. But once you do find it, tear into it. I'll go all in.
Yeah, you actually said something today that resonated with me pretty heavily when you were in the cold tub this morning, talking about how practice, right? Like, I also come from the background of kind of having natural talent. I was naturally gifted at games. I was very, very good. I didn't really like suffer an L until later on when the games were actually just bad. Like Halo just became a bad game. And that really like kind of threw a wrench in my plans of where I was going with things. But yeah, if you wanted to touch a little bit more on that topic and what you were discussing with practice and applying your all to everything that you do, not only just the things that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I was talented when I was young, and I was just a talented athlete, right? And growing up, I had this crutch where during practice or during anything but the game, I wouldn't try hard. I would just kind of loaf around, be lazy, because I knew I could turn it on in the games. I knew that really no amount of practice that anyone did was going to overcome my physical ability. And I had success that way, right? I got a college scholarship, was a 4-year starter at CSU. I made it to the NFL, Well, I got there and guess what? Everybody's real good in the NFL. Everybody's real good. And I don't even get a chance to get on the field. They're just like, oh, hey, man, yeah, you loaf at practice. You don't train that hard. We have this other guy that we just paid, $6 million because he was in the Pro Bowl last year. So see you later. And I was like, well, aren't we going to play for the position? They're like, no, we gave you 200 grand. We already gave this guy 6 million. We're not even going to consider it. He's the starter. And so it really showed me like everything you do, every time you wake up, everything you do is a representation of yourself, your family, your background. So you might as well do it to the best of your ability. And that's how I've been able to get from nothing into the UFC in 3 years, because every training I go to, every fight that I go to, I'm trying to express myself to the best of my capabilities.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I see that. I mean, I've seen the transition. Like you're approaching your final form. I would say you're like Cell, stage 3, finally beating Goku. And like you said, you were kind of trying to be the bad guy in the UFC, and in the Ultimate Fighter, and I kind of saw that in clips that they would show. I'm like, oh, Zac's instigating. Like this is typical Zac being an instigator, okay, but obviously no one knows that. So I thought it was so funny to see the snippets of it. I'm like, oh, everyone's going to see this as like Zac trying to be a nice guy, but they probably don't have the whole story and perspective on that. What was it like being in the Tough House? Was there like any kind of social experiment where they removed clocks or like outside information from you guys?
So that's the whole thing. So they don't show the world they don't really show you what it's like in there. You have no clocks, you have no phone, no internet, no television, no books. You have nothing to do but mess with each other. There's nothing to do in that house. You can have as much alcohol as you want, but there's nothing to do. And just going back to being like a 90s kid, it wasn't that big a deal for me. We had these, there was one of the girls, I think was like 23 or 24. Some of the guys were 25. And they were losing it. They were cracking, not having social media, not having stuff. It just reminded me of my childhood, just being bored, reading shampoo bottles on the toilet. Like, that's what we had nothing to do back then. So, yeah, the whole thing it's cool, crazy, but I loved it. I loved it. Everyone comes out saying, oh, it's the hardest thing. It's so crazy. I loved it. It's like going to train in a monastery for 6 weeks and someone pays for all your food and you can order the most lavish, extravagant food that you want, and all you do is train all day, every day.
And would you say that like helped you excel in that environment where like others probably failed?
Absolutely. I turned it up in the house. I fought better than I'd ever fought before. And there was other guys, younger guys, that unfortunately let everything else get to them. They let the cameras get to them. They let the schedule get to them, and they weren't able to put on their best performance.
How often was your coach actually like at the Apex training with you out? Because obviously we see the like shots of it and we're like, oh yeah, she's always there. Was it like that, or were you more with like her training staff and working with them more often than you were with your actual coach?
So Juliana was there every day. She was there twice a day, every day, the whole time with us. She was amazing, and she was on the Ultimate Fighter. That's how she got into the UFC as well. So she knew what we were going through, and she was the best coach that I could have asked for. She really took care of us and cared about us. And even when we got out of the house, she's offering people to come live in her house in Chicago and train with her out there if you wanted to. But I know there's like, I don't know how he's doing it this time, but the last time McGregor was on the season, right? He just was like, he's like, I'm not a coach, I'm a fighter. So I'm just going to sit here in my suit and watch, and my coaches will coach you. And that, that maybe there's merit to that as well. But yeah, so Juliana is the only one I can speak for, and she was there for the entire time, all day, every day.
No, that's kind of like how it seemed. Like she seemed very motherly, not obviously as a mother, but like to her fighters as well. She'd even come through to the house and show you guys support and things like that. So I was assuming that would like transition over, but obviously we only have the snippets and the small like spectrum that we actually get to see as viewers versus the people that are actually in it. Another thing that I want to touch on here is somebody asked me to ask you if you could fight any UFC fighter in the history, like in your weight divisions, who would you want to fight the most and why?
Anyone in history, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be John Jones. He's the GOAT. He is the GOAT. I'm not ready for him right now, but I'm gonna get better. I'm getting better every single day, and I would love to fight John and just test myself against the best to ever do it.
So just to make sure, this isn't your calling out John Jones. This is your want, right?
This is not me calling out John Jones, but someday, right? Someday,
Yeah.
it's
I was actually off on that. I was expecting you to say like Tito or Chuck from like back in the heyday. I was like, oh man, like I know this has got to be it. I was like so certain of myself on it. And then I saw the tweet from John, like of you talking about John Jones with the fight. And I was like, I was off. I was wrong. It's going to be John Jones. And that's kind of where my mind started leaning for you. But I did think that you'd pick the Iceman, honestly, at one point, because I know that you were definitely a big fan of his.
Chuck was the man when I was in high school. When you were in like seventh, eighth grade, Chuck was the man.
Yeah.
KO and everybody, like he definitely was a big influence on why I even started fighting.
And talking about influences, just overall, all sports and everything like that, who was your biggest inspiration to get you to become a professional athlete?
You know, it was my dad. Like, it's a cliche answer, but my dad came here he was an immigrant from Samoa. Came here, had to learn English and raise a family and gave us everything. Like, once I started realizing what he had to go through and what he did for us, it really drove me to be like, okay, I want to make millions of dollars to give to him, to take care of him and take care of my family and everyone else. But like, it's just inspirational to think, when my dad left Samoa, they didn't have electricity, they didn't have running water. And then he came to America and learned English and raised a family and gave us everything that we have. Like, how can I sit around and just work a lazy job and just be a regular dude when that's what I came from?
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. And I mean, again, it's so crazy to see the parallels that we kind of both have. Is my dad didn't go through those kinds of struggles, obviously, as we're not immigrants or anything like that, but he did start a construction business in the early or like late 80s, early 90s, and built it from literally the ground up, became a multi-million-dollar business, was literally everywhere. And like by the end of his life, he was basically like, I got nothing to show for that. Go take our name, make a legacy for you, make a legacy for me. And, I've never looked back since then. So it really definitely, like I said, man, huge role model. Always striving to be more like people that I've looked up to my entire life. You, my older brothers and things as well. I've even connected with your older brother a little bit here and there. When I've been out in San Diego trying to meet up with him. Hasn't worked out yet. We're still trying to have that actual timing thing get figured out. Streamer time is non-existent time. I don't actually know what a clock is. I just kind of go with the flow. Hours come, hours go type of vibe. Is it similar in the fighter world? Do you have like a good essence of like time and structure to your schedule?
So in general, the general answer for fighters is that no, they're the same way. They have no concept of time, right? Because you never really have to be anywhere. You're in charge of yourself. For me personally, coming from team sports though, like I'm insane about being on time, being placed at the right time. My wife thinks I'm a psychopath because I associate being late with physical pain, right? If you're late to practice, you're running.
Yeah.
And if somebody else is late to practice, you're running too. So I'm a Nazi when it comes to being on time, punctuality.
Yeah.
But that is not common for fighters.
And that's kind of what I would expect from you, as well as you're a father, ex-police officer. Punctuality is very, very important in law enforcement, I'm sure, especially with court dates and things like that as well. For me, something that I would definitely always strive to be, still to this date, more punctual. Still trying to figure it out. I think I showed up early today just to make sure that we were on time here. So I'm glad that I was able to not be running 10 or 15 minutes late on you today, because I knew you'd be like, hey man, where you at, bro? Like 2:00, huh?
Yeah, dude, punctuality. It's trade of kings. Punctuality is the trade of kings.
100%, 100%. And when it comes to your fighting, eating's obviously very important. What is your go-to fight night meal before you go into the ring? Do you have like a meal that you always eat, or does it change based on the fight?
So on fight night, so fight night is very, very specific, right? You don't want to have something like in your stomach while you're in the cage and someone's punching you. So it's more of like all of fight day is I'll eat a big carb heavy breakfast, pancakes, syrup, a massive breakfast. And then from then on, depending on how late I'm fighting, it's just snacking, fruit, keeping the carbs going, making sure I have fuel for the evening. But I don't want like any red meat or anything too fatty that's going to be still digesting when I'm in the cage. But the night before, after weigh-ins, after I recover, get hydrated, and get my appetite back, I fuzz my favorite food, and it's also I think the best way to refuel yourself after you've cut weight.
Fuzz delicious. I'm team ramen. You know, I know there's not like a specific on that, but like if I'm gonna go get noodle soup, I'm getting the ramen. You know, that's just who I am. That's what I love. Do you think that what makes pho the superior to ramen in your opinion?
So I also ramen. I love ramen, but pho is superior. For I like the rice noodles better than the egg noodles. And also, this is the main part. Any city in the world, any city in the world is going to have a halfway decent pho restaurant. It's hard finding good ramen spots. It's super hard. And if there is a good ramen spot, it's got a long wait. It's got a long wait.
True. Yeah, that's kind of how you can gauge it, right? If you go to a ramen restaurant and there's no line, you might want to ask yourself why you're there. Because, like, even in Naruto, right? People are lining up. Even in cartoons, right? Japan knows how to sell you on something that they're really good at. That's what they do, all right? Anime is good because it's really good when it's really good. Similar to ramen.
Yeah. And listen, I would love me some ramen too, but pho is number one.
If you could change any rule in the UFC that's currently not one that you like or something like that, what would it be?
So, I mean, we're going to go back to me just kind of being an idiot, but I wish that they would bring back head stomps and knees to a grounded opponent. Like everyone talks about how dominant wrestling is, and that wrestling is the best art, and wrestlers kill everyone, and all the Dagestanis to be wrestling. That's because I can't kick you in the head when you're on the ground. And it's the rule set. The rule set has allowed wrestlers to win and take advantage, and that's totally fine. But in Pride, right, the old school great organization of Pride, they could stomp you in the face, they could knee you in the head on the ground, they could sprawl and drive knees into your head. And we didn't see that many wrestlers taking over Pride, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could still knee on the ground when Brock and like Frank Mir were the heavyweights, right?
Well, you can knee to the body, but yeah, you can't knee to
The head, right?
Ever since the UFC made people wear gloves, you couldn't knee to the head or stomp to the head.
Yeah, that's fair. That is kind of crazy, kind of insane out there to want that to be the rule change, but I could see it. I mean, that was kind of a topic that I had someone talking to me about. They're like, "Yo, why is this person not just going to town on them on the ground like that?" I'm like, because that's against the rules, my guy. Like, you can't just tee off on someone that could kill them potentially, you know? And I mean, I guess you guys are modern day gladiators. Would you say that yourself?
Absolutely. Like that's literally what we are. You know, we're in a circle, people are around us, all drunk and crazy and screaming and wanting us to murder each other. Like we are absolutely modern day gladiators. And that's another super valid point too. Everyone always wants to compare us to football players, us to basketball players, the things we get, the things they get. We are sports entertainment, right? It doesn't matter if you win a million fights in a row if they're all boring and nobody wants to watch them. We're sports entertainment. You have to entertain the fans with either what you're doing in the cage or what you do on the mic afterwards. And that's what sets us apart from something like NFL, where it's really just all about who wins and who loses.
Yeah. That's something that kind of from your last fight, a lot of people had a lot of hate for you on the fact that they felt like your fight wasn't as exciting as some of your other fights. Would you feel that you felt that way after watching it back and not just being in the fight, or do you have any like thing to address towards that?
Listen, I'm not gonna shy away from it at all. I needed to win. I needed some money. I needed my win bonus. And the last time I was in that cage, I got tapped on the chin and woke up in an ambulance. So my confidence was not as high as it had been being an undefeated fighter and going out there and trying to put on exciting performances. And I admit that I held on for a safe victory. I pushed Jordan against the cage and realized that he did not know how to get off. And so in my head, I was just like, well, I guess sign that other check, Dana, because this is where we're going to be for the rest of the fight. And then in the third round, I was like, all right, I'm going to open up. I'm going to open up a little bit. Started throwing some haymakers, and he tagged me. And I was like, I guess we're going right back to the cage, man. And I do understand that the fans were frustrated with that, especially from what they've seen from me on The Ultimate Fighter. But this is my life. I'm here to entertain. I'm going to entertain you guys, but I needed a win. I will never compromise my win to make an entertaining fight. I don't want an entertaining loss. I want entertaining wins, but I need wins.
Is there a I don't know if you can talk about this if you're under an NDA. Is there like a loss like allowance that you have before you're just cut from a roster?
No. So there's nothing in writing. The general rule of thumb is that you don't want to go and you don't want to lose 2 in a row, but there's nothing in writing. The UFC has kept guys on that they like for long stretches of time, and they've cut dudes that were on win streaks after their first loss. So
Yeah.
You want to be as exciting as you can be, and that's what kind of keeps you on if you're losing, but you're losing in exciting fights. But they definitely don't cut you if you're winning your fights, so that's how it goes.
Yeah. Like, so I have another solid long term friend that's in the UFC actually, Brandon Royval, Chatfield High School. Him and I hung out quite a lot because he was good friends with the hockey team, and I was good friends with the hockey team because Green Mountain didn't have a hockey team. So my friends would either go and play for Chatfield or Columbine, and Columbine and Chatfield had this huge rivalry. So like Royval and I would actually watch the Columbine and Chatfield kids fight, and he would laugh because he was like, I'm going to be a professional fighter, so I'm not going to fight any of these kids. And then he did it. And it's pretty crazy to see kind of his transition and how he's worked through injuries and things like that. Once you have an injury, do you think that kind of starts to always play in your mind once you go into the ring?
I mean, I can only speculate, knock on wood. I've been very fortunate. I've not had any injuries, but you think about everything when you're walking to the cage. You think about every little bump and bruise that you've had in training. I think about the stitches that I've got over my eyes, like are they going to bust back open, all this stuff. But at least for me, the most addicting part of fighting is once you get in there, once you touch gloves and that guy hits you for the first time, like you become Superman. You don't feel anything. There's no pain. And like I said, I can only speak from my experience, but like Royval is a madman. He might be the most entertaining fighter in the UFC. His fights are balls to the wall madness the entire time. But he's also fighting at a super small weight class, so it's a give and take. But was it his shoulder that he hurt?
Yeah, he dislocated his shoulder against Moreno when they were scrapping on the ground, and unfortunately couldn't get back up and got punched in the head a few times while on the ground and not defending himself, so they had called the fight. Do you think there are a lot of early calls in the UFC today versus the old school?
I mean, definitely versus they're just going to keep getting earlier and earlier, the calls. The more people bring up fighter safety, the more people talk about CTE, all this stuff. The judges, nobody wants to be responsible for somebody's career ending or somebody's life ending. So these judges are human. They're going to jump in there. They're not going to let guys take unnecessary damage. And that's probably for the best. Is the thing that is rough, like we talked about, is maybe you're fighting for your job and maybe you get cut. But if my job's not on the line and you expect me to go out there and give it my all, then I want the ref to protect me as well.
Yeah, and I think that's like not a bad thing. A lot of people will like throw their hands up and be like, "Oh, it's becoming less and less of a combat sport, this and that." But ultimately, you guys are human beings. That's what it is. And women, men and women are both fighters today in the UFC, and keeping you guys safe so that you can continue to be entertainers that you are is, I think, top priority, and it should be.
So like I said, the biggest issue is if you get a bad stoppage and get cut. But outside of that, let a dude lose and come back and fight again, instead of letting a dude get absolutely murdered and he's never the same, and he doesn't get the opportunity to go be himself in that cage again.
Yeah, agreed. And like we said, like leaving the ring and not being who you are ever again too also has its penalties and things like that in your personal life. One thing that I wanted to touch on is you said that you believe that Jones is the GOAT. Well, for all of combat sports, in the history of them, do you think he is the best pound for pound fighter ever? Or do you think there's somebody maybe back in the day, Gracie, something like that, that was better than him?
No, Jones is he's it, man. He's it, and it's people don't like the answer, and we can talk about the steroids, right? We can talk about that, but that's we're getting into nuances, right? We're getting into is Barry Bonds the best hitter? Yes. Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Like so, and Jones is the best, and he would murder it. I don't care if you want to talk about Rickson Gracie, Hoist Gracie, Sakuraba, Fedor. I don't care who you want to bring up. Jones would murder all, and he's the GOAT, and he's still in his prime. So it is a fun time to be in the light heavyweight division, where you have the top of the you can see the mountaintop. We can see the best to ever do it, and we can all chase after it.
Yeah, I agree at this point. Seeing just how many title defenses he's had, how many title wins he has. I mean, when you're in a title fight, you're fighting the best of the best. Everyone's coming, taking their shot at you. They have 5 rounds instead of 3. What do you think it means to be in a title fight, and how do you prepare yourself for something like that?
So I hate that MMA does a different number of rounds for title fights. It's stupid. Imagine if the Super Bowl they played an extra 15 minutes every Super Bowl, we just want to see who really the best team is. And luckily I'm in a camp with the guys that fight in a lot of main events. So your training is totally different. Training for a 25-minute fight is completely different than a 15-minute fight. Like, you have to train these energy systems, right? It's more of a long distance, long runs, long pushes, as opposed to being short and explosive. And especially heavyweight, man. There's maybe 4 heavyweights on the roster that can actually slug for 5 rounds. And it's a totally different training camp that you have to put in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and comes together. Do you think that Stipe can go 5 rounds with John Jones, or do you think that there's anybody right now that can go 5 rounds with John Jones?
Young Stipe in his prime, that would have been a great matchup. That would have been really fun to see, but I don't even know when the last Stipe hasn't fought in like 4 or 5 years. And so he fought Francis before then, but before Francis, he fought Daniel Cormier 3 times in a row. Like, Stipe is going to get mauled by John. Maybe he puts up a better fight than Cyril did, just because he has a wrestling background. But I think John absolutely mauls Stipe. The only person that can push John Jones is Curtis Blades. He's the only person who has the size advantage and the wrestling. The one thing that we've never seen how John does is how he does against a bigger person, right? He came up to heavyweight, and Gon has had fights at heavyweight, but he was smaller than John. Gon was like 246 and John was 247. So Curtis is bigger than John, and he's a wrestler. And that's what we've never seen John have to deal with, someone who's bigger than him and on top of him. And that's, to me at least, as a dude who's deep in this sport and loves watching it, that's the only matchup I'm interested to see with John or Francis, if they could get him back or would take him back. See how he does with that massive power. But Stipe, I love Stipe. He's the best heavyweight of all time, best heavyweight champion of all time. But he's old, and he hasn't fought in forever.
Basically just a firefighter now, right?
Yeah. I mean, or he's just a retired guy. Like, I'm not sure how much fighting of fires he actually does. Like, he's got tons of money from being the champ, and I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I know he runs his own camp out there in Ohio, but I just am not. It just doesn't interest me. I don't see how Stipe wins that fight.
So you're not saying that you think that Curtis Blades is the dude because he's your partner, though? That's not like a biased opinion. You really do believe that he has the best matchup against John Jones right now?
I mean, it's a 100% biased opinion, but that doesn't make it wrong. That doesn't make it wrong. I He is my close friend and training partner, and I want that for him. But if anyone can come out and tell me how I'm wrong, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I don't got one on that. I actually completely agree with you, and I don't even know Curtis Blades. So watching his fights have been exhilarating. I would love to see those two tee off on each other. We'd actually probably get something longer than 17 seconds with a nut kick and then a guillotine, because that was all that fight was. Another great fight from that card was the Valentina fight. Do you think she comes back and regains her title?
So I'll be honest, I was like Mr. Casual after that fight, and I thought it was lucky. I was like, oh, she caught her on a spin kick and finished that choke. But then they showed that Grasso was practicing that in the back. She was practicing waiting for Valentina to spin and jumping on her back. So, I mean, first off, props to Grasso. That wasn't luck. That was something that she envisioned and she got it done. That was amazing. With that said, Valentina was beating her. And if they do the same fight again and Valentina just doesn't spin, I think she wins.
Yeah, as a spectator, obviously, I don't know as much of the in depth things that fighters know due to the fact that I'm not well practiced in it, but I have watched a lot of fights in my day. And I will continue to watch a lot of fights. From my perspective, it definitely seemed like Valentina was telegraphing things a little bit more than she would have liked in terms of how her fighting style was going from round to round. And I do think that it was definitely something that she got caught on, not in terms of luck, but in terms of just telegraphing that kick too many times throughout the rounds of the fight.
Yeah, and like I said, hats off to Alexa Grasso and her team. They saw a hole that Valentina has, and something that she leans on and shows, and they took perfect advantage of it. That was probably the most like exciting thing to me afterwards, once I realized that no, they were waiting for that spin and they were ready to jump on it.
Yeah, that's basically what I saw too. And moving into our next big event here, which fight on this stacked card coming up here in about a week or so now, 2 weeks, are you the most excited to see?
I'm gonna have to pull it up. Which one? What are we talking about?
Talking about Leon Edwards and Usman
Uh,
3.
so Usman and Gaethje, both Team Elevation, they train with us, so I'm excited to see both of their fights. It's going to be intriguing, right? Similar to what we just talked about with Valentina and Alexa Grasso. Usman was winning that entire last fight before a fifth round crazy head kick. It would seem that he just has to go in and do the same things and not get kicked in the head, and he'll win an easy fight. But we'll have to see. You get confidence knocking a guy out. You get crazy confidence. I did it once, I can do it again. So that'll be very interesting to see. I am most excited for the Justin Gaethje fight, though. That is a dude that just brings it every single time, and he's fighting a really good striker. So it's going to be a fun, fan-friendly fight.
Yeah, I think I have Gaethje as my top on that card as well. I've been following his fights since I knew he trained in the same camp as you guys, and just how exciting and like off the wall that dude is. That dude is a freak of nature in the ring. Do you ever get to spar with him?
So I'm way too big. He fights at 155. So that means he walks around at probably 170, 180. I walk around at 240 pounds. It's just neither of us would get much out of it sparring each other. But I'm a fan, man, and he's awesome. And he fights with the type of bravery that I wish I could emulate, and that I'm working towards trying to match. Just not like I said in my fight, right? I held on for a victory because I needed that victory. Justin does not care. He is going to go kill or be killed. He would rather lose by knockout than win by decision.
And there's not a whole lot of fighters, I think, since Connor has left the UFC that still fight like that as often, where it's a leave it all out on the canvas, either knock me out or I'm knocking you out kind of effect. Who in your weight class would you say has that kind of effect right now in the light heavyweight?
I'm not sure. So Jamal Hill, right? He just won the belt, and before that it was all KOs. and he lost one time by armbar to Paul Craig. But he's pretty crazy, or he's pretty, tactical about getting his finishes, and it's paid off for him well. He's the champ right now. Jiri is, I think, like 20 finishes. And so when those two, when Jiri gets healthy and those two finally get matched up, it should be really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm definitely excited to see how Hill contends with his title and continues to have dominating performances like he's had. Where do you see yourself on your path to a title fight? How many fights do you think it's going to take for you to potentially get there?
It's going to be, it's hard to put a number to it, but it's not going to be in the next two fights, right? My goal right now is just to go out there and get convincing and exciting performances and just show people who I am. Let people get to know me a little bit better in the cage. So my goal is to try and fight a lot. I'm healthy. I'm not hurt. I want to fight. So I would love to fight 3 or 4 times this year, 3 or 4 times next year. And then after, 8 UFC fights, we can talk title shots, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that we saw like Royval kind of make a quick ascendance through his weight class with how fast he was going. I mean, it took him like 3 fights, I think, to get into a contender fight, which, like we said, he had lost when he dislocated his shoulder at that point. Do you feel like some of the people that get those fast routes to title fights are sometimes put in harm's way instead of actually getting their shot? Or do you think that's what it takes sometimes to evolve as a fighter?
So this is why it's important to have good coaches and a good team behind you. If the UFC sends me a name, the answer is yes. I don't care who it is, but that's why you have to have coaches that care about you as a person and not just don't see you as a paycheck, because they're your coaches that see you every day and train you every day. They're the only ones that are going to know, is this guy ready for this step up in competition? Can he win this fight, or is he just being served up? And so Brandon was an example. He was such a crazy, exciting fighter that the UFC they're like, we just got to keep putting this guy in there, because every time he gets in there, it's a crazy fight. And I don't know anything about his, physicality, but I think he said that it was like a nagging injury. That was something that he had been wanting to get fixed already. And for me, that's a tough thing to throw a dude in there that has a nagging injury against the best in the world, right? Brandon Moreno, who is the champ right now, the undisputed champ, and you're tossing him in there compromised. That's a tough call, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's kind of something that we as spectators don't actually have really any idea about, is how much those coaches, how much your team really puts in to knowing you better than you know yourself almost when it comes to those big fights, and knowing when it's time and when it's maybe sometimes the right time to pass on a fight.
Yeah, and early in your career, it's hard to think about ever passing on fights, and that's why, like I said, it's got to go from your coaches. The fighter wants to fight, and he's always going to fight. So you got to put these like checks and balances in place to take care of you and make sure that you have a long career.
Agreed. So to transition a little bit from fighting here, as you can see in my background, huge anime fan. You actually were the reason I think I even got into anime as a kid, showing me DBZ when we were growing up. Is there any anime you're watching today, like as of most recently, anything that you keep up with or anything that you're interested in?
So I still love anime. I watch it all the time. I just finished the last season of Attack on Titan, the most current one, and it was bananas.
So you watched the 1 hour special?
I have not watched the 1 hour special.
Okay, so you're about to watch that next then, where we're at the like final chapter, part 1 type stuff, where they're just delaying it on us, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard anything from the manga readers at all? Like, do you follow any of that on social media where like there was the outcry?
No, I haven't.
So there's like a big issue right now with the ending. The creator came out at his panel in New York City Anime last year and literally started crying and apologizing to his fans, who then started crying and praising him. But still, the masses on Reddit and those C-Poles of the world really have kind of criticized how he wrapped things up, saying that he wasn't in tune with his characters and it seemed rushed.
Interesting. Well, I'll have to see how it ends. But I've been, I keep up with So I like to binge. I don't like to wait for the new episodes to come
I'm one
out.
of
So I let
those
them build
people.
up and I binge. I also like dub over subtitles. So I'm
It's all those
definitely
hits to the head, man. They're catching up to you, you know?
so here's the thing. I read a lot. I like reading books. One of my favorite thing about anime is the quality of the animation. The fight scenes, the quality of the animation is so high, especially the new stuff that's coming out is so insane. I don't want to be reading the bottom of the screen when I'm trying to watch the animation.
So, do you feel that dubbed voice actors, American voice actors, put in as much of an effort as Japanese voice actors then?
So I mean, we're getting into some serious spicy content here, but I enjoy that. I'm just gonna say it. I feel like American voice actors have more of a range. Have a more of a range. There's characters with super deep voices. There's middle voices. I can tell the difference between the male and the female characters. I can't do that when I watch the subs. And it killed me that the last half of the last season of Attack on Titan was all subtitled. I'm like having to pause and rewind and be like, okay, now I know what's happening. Now I can watch the fight scenes.
I agree with you there, especially in like the ones that are more dramatic, like Attack on Titan, where it's not just like a bunch of action scenes, right? Like Demon Slayer right now, in my opinion, by far, nothing comes close to how good the animation is in that show. And honestly, I could not. They could take the subtitles off the screen. I would still love it as much as I do. It would still be a tattoo on my body. But regardless, I feel you. I mean, I rewind Attack on Titan probably like every like 6 frames. I'm like, gotta go back. All right, what did they say exactly? All right, back to digesting everything on the screen. So I get that, and I know like a lot of people too. Like I'm not one that's like a hater on someone that's like, oh, I like dub. I don't. From the 90s, if you grew up in the 90s and you watched anime, dubbed was what we had, and we had the best dubbing during the time.
If you go from dubbed Dragon Ball Z and you try and watch sub Dragon Ball Z, it's not the same.
No, they're not the same show at all, due to the fact that Goku in Japan originally was a meme of Superman, right?
Yeah.
And that's why the voice was like that. Because they wanted you to like not take him too seriously, but he was also just this badass character, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen One Punch Man?
I've seen I'm totally caught up on One Punch Man.
Who wins in a fight between Goku and Saitama?
I mean, the whole purpose of Saitama's character is that he beats everyone with one punch. That's the whole purpose. But what cracks me up about One Punch Man the most is that the show is a joke, right? One Punch Saitama is a joke, but that is the highest quality animation that exists, in my opinion. His fight with Boros, that is maybe the best fight scene in the history of anime from a joke anime.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I agree. I mean, I was like back into anime, like during the time that One Punch was coming out. I was like, okay, like I like anime. I fell in love with anime again when I watched One Punch, because I was like, damn, we're in the golden age. Like this is where things are going to just start to excel. And I don't think we've had animation studios actually compete the way that they are today, maybe in the history of all of anime. And yeah, Boros versus Saitama, by far one of the coolest fights I've ever seen in my entire life. Have you gotten to see Jujutsu Kaisen?
I have not watched that one yet. I'm right now I'm on so I just finished Attack on Titan. I guess I have an hour special that I have to watch, but I'm on Demon Slayer. That's what I'm working.
Where at in Demon Slayer are you?
I just finished the first season.
Okay.
I got a lot to go.
So when he has the broken sword, spoilers, everyone that's watching if you haven't, but if you haven't, it's been out long enough and it blew up all over the internet, so I don't really feel bad about this. When he chops off the demon's head with the sword and he's breathing fire for the first time, how did that make you feel?
It was pretty epic. You know, it was like I still have to, like, because I got kids, right? I'm watching it out of the side of my eye, and I'm moving around and making sure they're not necessarily getting too into it too.
Yeah.
But that was one of the times that I was like, wait, what? Like, I gotta rewind this, watch it like 6 times.
Yeah. I mean, I still watch it. Like, I go back and just watch that scene all the time because it broke the internet. That's how good that scene really was. Where like people are like, what's this anime thing people have been talking about for all these years? Because it's good, man. I mean, I don't watch TV. Like, I don't watch TV at all.
Well, and I listen. So I'm gonna plug one of my favorites right now. The stories, like the stories on anime, are so unique and so beyond. I was just telling James the other day, our mutual friend, because he's trying to get back into anime, and he's like, well, give me a list, give me what I should watch. I'm a huge fan of the Iron-Blooded Orphans, the Gundam
Oh
series.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And the way that ends, dude, gave me emotions, right? A cartoon gave me emotions that I haven't felt in my entire life.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my God, like I am feeling a feeling of sorrow right now for these fictional characters. Game of Thrones didn't make me feel this way. None of this made me feel this way. These fictional cartoon characters are getting me right now, deep inside.
The feels really were activated for the first time in a fighter's life. Can you believe it? Can you guys believe it? Everyone listening to this, can you actually believe that it took an anime to make a fighter feel weak on the inside? Obviously, probably the birth of your child, things like that, similar effects. But to know that anime drew that out of you just makes me feel so good to be a weeb and know that we're doing something good for the world, just like that.
Absolutely, dude. And I'm a total, like I said, when I have time and there's something I want to splurge and just do just for myself, it's watch anime. That's how I like to spend my free time.
I feel like that's our main dialogue outside of like things like this, or like when I ask you about a fight or something, is usually like you're asking me about an anime. Like, hey man, what happened? Was it that good? I'm like, oh, it is that good, brother.
That's because you always post it. That's obviously your thing. And
yeah.
I'm always like, oh, because I have to curate. I can't watch everything. I've only got a few hours a week. So I'm always like, all right, you got to let me know what's worth watching.
And like, that's where I have like a hard time, because I know people have such tight schedules and stuff. So I'm like, oh, like, here's what I would be watching now. But then I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have kids. Like, I don't have pets even. I literally have me. I take care of me. My girlfriend of almost 6 years now, never lived together for a single second, right? So like, my whole goal is taking care of this guy. Obviously, parts of my life outside of things that a lot of people don't know about, I didn't get to do that all the time, right? But once that like door opened up for me, never looked back. I can't. I don't know. It's just not something I'm ready for yet, and I honestly just get to be a big kid.
Well, and listen, it's important to do that well, right? Don't try and take care of other people if you're not taking care of yourself, right? If you don't have number one taken care of, don't add more people into it. And this is what we're going to spin off on some weird parenting advice here, but like I tell this to my wife all the time, it's the airplane oxygen mask rule, right? I can't do anything for anybody else if I'm not taken care of. If I'm not doing what I need to take care of myself, I definitely can't help my wife, my kids, the world, our society. I can't do anything for that if I'm not taking care of myself.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's the same thing I say to my mom, even still to this day. I'm like, hey, I got to have my oxygen mask on before I can apply myself to anything else. And I think that's a pretty good like philosophy to live your life by. I don't want to take up too much more of your time here, but I got one last question for you. What games this year are you the most excited for? Do you get to game at all anymore? And I think that's what I got for you.
So I do not get to game that often. I'm still trying to get through the God of War sequel. And I'm that's one of my favorite series, but I just don't have a whole lot of time to get through it. I just got a Nintendo Switch, so I am pumped for the new Zelda.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't get to game as much as I would like to. But yeah, so I'm trying to finish the God of War, pumped for the new Zelda. I probably couldn't even tell you any other than like any big name games that are coming out.
Diablo 4 would be the thing that tops my list for you. Obviously, multiplayer games, a lot harder for you to have time for, but those style of games, those adventure RPGs, you still get that effect of playing an RPG, but you can kind of play at your own pace instead of feeling like you're getting left behind by the rest of your server.
Yeah, I didn't even know a new Diablo was coming out. Does it have PvP?
It does.
The last Diablo.
But like not like in the effect that like you have to flag yourself like you did in WoW. So you would have to go and like actually like slash PvP essentially. Outside of that, it's all team based. From what I'm seeing so far, we actually have the first beta playtest coming up here next weekend, I believe, for our first looks into it. But everything I've seen, game looks beautiful, looks like OG, like dark style of Diablo, like we all got into back in its heyday.
Wait, what's that game that you were playing, the beta recently that I asked you about?
Was it
Darker or something?
Yeah, Dark and Darker. So that right there is, I don't know if you're familiar with the game Escape from Tarkov, where it's like a instead of being a like battle royale or something like that, it's a looter round based dungeon crawler. So you go into the dungeon, you're a team of 3, and your goal essentially is to just find a bunch of loot, and if you can, kill everybody else that gets in your way. But you got to get to these portals that either you have 2 options. You can go down to hell and try even harder NPCs, and they're insane. Like the health bar on these NPCs are massive. Like it's pretty struggling. They'll start to make it even harder than it is right now because you can kind of kite things around by like using your bow and arrow with a ranger or something. But the game is amazing in my opinion. It's got some things that need to be polished. But they did a really good job on taking like a game like Diablo and making it a first-person shooter and giving you that same effect of like, oh my god, I'm stuck in a dungeon. How the hell do I get out of this? Why are there so many people coming for me? I need loot. Like it's just, it's good.
My favorite gaming period in my life, and like I said, I'm a little bit older than Tanner, but I love Diablo 2 permadeath PvP servers, just waiting in bushes just to gank people. Like that's what I love to do, is just ruin people's day, and like people are trying to get loot and you just pop out of the bushes and put them away. And they don't make games like that anymore. Battle royales are close. That at least it's almost all v all. You have your little squad and it's one life. Like I don't like deathmatch anymore. I don't like just racking up kills and then people get to come back and come back and come back.
Yeah, the arena shooter kind of style like that has definitely fallen off in my mind as well, just because it doesn't feel like there's anything like lost, right? Like you're kind of just going through the same simulation over and over again. And that's where I think Dark and Darker would be something you enjoy, because of the fact that it takes that fantasy world aspect that you've always loved from Warhammer and applies it to a new style of like gameplay with that looter and shooter style of gaming, where it's like, yo, whatever's on your body, that's what you brought in here. Now that could be worth 10,000 gold. You could be wearing underwear worth 0 gold. But man, when you take 10,000 gold off of somebody, you feel so good, and then you go and stash it and you never use it again.
Yeah, well, that's when I saw you play that, I was like, oh, this is a game I could get on.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I'll definitely keep you in the loop on that one when it's coming out, and I'll have to see if I can get you on a stream in the not so distant future with that, and maybe we can play a little bit of games. But I appreciate your time. Is there anything you gotta give a shout out to, or anything coming up in your life that you want people to have a little bit more awareness on?
No, not much. Follow me on all my social media, just ZACPAUGA. I don't put a lot of anime or gaming content on there, but if it's something that people are interested in, I always can and am interested in branching out to that. And, just keep my name out there. I'm trying to build up some hype, and I want to fight in June and just trying to look for an opponent. So
amazing. Well, thank you, Zach, for coming on the stream today and hanging out with me and the rest of the zBoy Nation. I'll be sure to add your links down in the description below on the YouTube video and in the other podcast links as well. But that's going to be it from me today. And with Zach here, I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break, and then I will be right back.